All right. All right. I've got your Zabatai Zevi and Zeptian Frankist
Yes, sir.
thing right there. Okay, I've got that pulled up and should be perfectly good there. Yep, we're good. Okay. All right, go ahead.
So today I wanted to start with talking about Zabbatai Zevi, who was a major influence on what would become Sabbatean Frankism, and Jacob Frank, who would be an influential member and influence on Freemasonry and the Bavarian Illuminati. So Sabbatai Zevi was born on the Jewish holiday of Tisha B'Av in Smyrna, which is now a part of Turkey. It was an Ottoman trade hub. His family, who were Romanio Jews from Patras, Greece. His father, Mordecai, who gained his wealth as a poultry dealer, but also as an agent for an English trading house during the Ottoman Venetian Wars. The name Zabbatai, uh, meaning Saturn in Hebrew, um, is linked to Jewish messianic expectations. Um, and as we know and have discussed, Saturn is the god that they worship. Zevi studied the Talmud under Rabbi Joseph Escapa at a Smyrna yeshiva, um, becoming quite adept in mastering it, but finding the halakha unappealing. Halakha is Jewish um, customs and ways of life. And he found himself drawn to Kabbalism. And as a result of the influence of Isaac Luria's teachings and um, and the Zohar, practicing asceticism, which is religious practices of living a somewhat pious life, and Tikkunum, which which is mystical purification exercises, the purpose of which to commune with divine forces.
This is fucking crazy. Like this is fucking like I don't like of all the stuff that we've talked about by the way. This is some of the weirdest shit that I can see somebody like I don't know, this guy thinks he's a fucking wizard.
Yeah, 100%. He's attempting to place himself in a certain state of being, and through exercises and practices like Tikkunum, just to like briefly go over it, it's a Hebrew word that has multiple meanings, and it can refer to chanting the Torah or the Talmud.
Is that when they're doing this?
Yeah, yeah,
That's when
yeah,
that's what they're doing? When they're bobbing their
100%.
head and talking and they've got like the okay.
The the tefillum, and the bands tied around their arms, and they're wearing the black
Okay.
cube on their skull.
Okay.
Um, and
What the okay, I'm sorry to like interrupt, but that's
no,
fucking
please.
insane because like I don't know why I never put that together and I just thought I guess it's still insane too that Catholics do that shit with the fucking the rosary and the fucking humming and the worshiping like that. But the like casting spell. I never really knew that they were just like casting spells or fucking like, because that's pretty much like what you see in Dungeons and Dragons,
Dude,
where you've got
casting
like the
spells is a good way of putting it. Yeah.
they're monks like in Dungeons and Dragons, like doing all the fucking hand gestures and all that stuff. That's like because I just saw Dave Portnoy like a couple of weeks ago when he was, getting himself viral on Twitter and all that shit. And then I seen so many people with that fucking hat and the little thing on them, and I guess I never really thought about it as anything like, I guess that's just their religion and they're just saying prayers, but like no, that's a warlock.
100%. They are
That's nuts.
chanting. They are chanting, and usually for the purpose of communing with divinity. But these are what we would consider um, demons or angels. According to the Zohar, they believe that they can commune with demons and angels. This is one of the practices that Solomon practiced, as we discussed in the previous conversation. Um, very much so. They're trying to invoke spirits.
How the fuck
So,
does anyone like knowing that if like I mean, I can be ignorant and not know much, but like people that make the arguments that are like well read on Christianity and Judaism, like how the hell do you say anywhere that this is anything close? Like this is because this is ordinary practice. I've seen them doing the thing in like a regular synagogue,
mhm.
talking or, out in the streets just like it I never didn't realize they were fucking casting spells and shit. Like that
Well,
that's so
it,
nuts.
it in other religious practices, for instance, in Africa, people dance to a drum in a rhythmic nature in order to invoke these spirits. In Judaism, they do the bobbing while they chant. Um, Similarly, the same practice, more or less, they're just doing it in a slightly different manner, and their god, being Saturn, or the lower gods beneath him, or technically angels or demons, are the beings they wish to commune with.
Dude, this goes
So,
way into what we were talking about privately about the fucking Sora or Saruman in Lord of the Rings and then him sending out his fucking orcs. Like this is a fucking guy in a fucking black robe with a fucking pointy hat.
and funny you say that, and as we've discussed on Low Value Mail, I've brought this up. The Tengu was a demon in Japan that's associated with wearing the um, telefin, and it has the shawl that they wear, a very long nose, a beard, and it's very much a depiction of a Jew. And Tikkun can also refer to chanting the Kabbalah, um, which was composed in the 14th century. So he's a big fan, and he found it less appealing to study halakha, which is like Jewish ordinances for daily life. He was less interested in the common day practices of Jews and was more interested in communing with spirits or divine forces,
That
some
shit
may
really
say.
gives me the fucking creeps. I don't know why this bothers me so much, but like it really this is fucking creepy ass shit. Like it really completely changes my view of Jews. Like from just being like the guys that are fucking controlling the world through like a organized mafia to like really what they're like there's actually people in this that are like actually fucking casting spells. I
They're
know I
dark
keep saying this,
magicians.
but
No,
that's
they're dark
fucking
magicians.
nuts.
100. Essentially, all magicians are practicing black magic, any form of magic to manipulate the world around you or to manipulate aspects of one's life or another's is a form of magic, and usually it's not necessarily positive. Um, so he's a big fan of the Talmud, and just for the sake of giving a little bit of a foundation for those who may not be familiar, um, the sources for this information is the Talmud by Sokino Press, the Hebrew English version. It's also The Truth About the Talmud by Michael Hoffman. There's The Jewish History of Religion by Israel Sahak. And there's The Plot Against Christianity by Elizabeth Dilling. So Jews will say that the information that is often presented by critics of the Talmud is taken out of context, misconstrued, or a poor translation being we don't understand Hebrew. But
You
I
should
call
see
that bull.
Robbie. You should see Robbie Bernstein's episode a couple months back when he tried to justify the Talmud, and like halfway through it, he's like, "This, I'm not doing such a good job of making this look like just a couple of
As you
rabbis
can.
arguing over time."
And there are aspects of the Talmud that do get into day-to-day aspects of their lives, like if a piece of pork was thrown into a pot by a Christian when the Jews weren't looking, if you took the piece of pork out real quick, would you still be allowed to eat it? And this is what we get into with halakha and the foundation of the Talmud does discuss aspects of halakha, but more so it gives them a foundation on which to interact with the rest of the world. And for those not familiar, the Talmud um, supersedes the Old Testament in its authority for the Jews. The Talmud is the foundation on which the vast majority of Jews live their lives and um, develop their view and framework of the world and the manner in which they interact with it. In my opinion, it's the most racist and blasphemous book the world's ever known. Talmud was eventually put into writing between the third and sixth centuries, but it's based on the oral traditions of the elders, which they learned in Babylon and in their time prior through their interactions with the Canaanites. But the official predecessor to the Jerusalem Talmud, oral, the Babylonian oral traditions of the elders. This is what Christ was rebuking um, when he spoke of their oral law and the traditions of your elders make you void of the word of God. That's found in Matthew 15. So the English translation's been watered down and made palatable for the English readers. So what
Is that Saint Matthew 15, the by the traditions of your elders you make void the word of God? Is that is that referencing how they don't say God?
that was, I believe, a conversation Jesus had with the Pharisees. and he was telling them, by you holding steadfast to these traditions, um, the things that you're doing, you void what what you've been taught, and by adhering to these things, you're not of the Father.
Okay.
He repeatedly, on numerous occasions, tells them, you're not of the Father, you are of the Father, you are of your father, the devil. Um, and when we speak of that, we'll get into that a little bit later. It's Lucifer, Saturn, Hell. These are all representations of the same.
You might want to get a little closer to your mic.
Sure thing.
Okay.
So some of the verses, if you, in the Talmud, if you were to kind of categorize them and group them together, we could find that there's Jewish supremacy, hatred towards Gentiles, or as they call us, goys, which translates to cattle or non-human. And there's blasphemy against Jesus Christ, his mother, the Virgin Mary, and Christians in general. So just to go over a few of them, we'll start with Jewish supremacy. If a goy hits a Jew, he must be killed. Sanhedrin 58b. If a Jew finds an object lost by a goy, it does not have to be returned. Baba Mazia 24a. If a Jew murders a goy, there will be no death penalty. Sanhedrin 7a. What a Jew steals from a goy, he may keep. Sanhedrin 57a. Jews may use subterfuge to circumvent a goy. This is where um, Jews lie. Baba Kama 113a. All children of the goyim are animals. Yebamoth 98a. Girls born to a goyim are in a state of nida, menstrual uncleanliness from birth. Aboda Zara 36b. Then we have some verses which show their hatred towards the Gentiles. Goyim are not humans, they are beasts. Baba Mazia 114b. If you eat with the goy is the same as eating with a dog. Tosapoth, Jebamoth 94b. Even in the best of goyim should all be killed. Soferim 15. Sexual intercourse between the goyim is like intercourse between animals. Sanhedrin 74b.
That one right there, I always tell my wife about that. Well, I don't always tell her, but I've had this conversation multiple times about how they not only see us as animals, but the other thing is um, they, um, the Orthodox up in New York have a habit of fucking a lot of prostitutes and having a large STD rate up there because they basically see it as not cheating because they're basically fucking an animal, which
Correct.
is
Is insane to even think about that. They're okay calling us animals, but they're literally fucking an animal in that case then.
yeah, that's pretty wild. Baby, I didn't cheat. She was a bitch. Literally, she was a she was a female dog.
Yeah, 100%. Um, when it comes to a Gentile in peace times, one may harm him indirectly, for instance, by removing a ladder after he had fallen into a crevice. And that's Sulkan Aruk Yoreh Da 158. That's in the Hebrew edition only.
You know that
Um,
happened. That had to have happened, and the
yeah,
guy was like, "All right,
I
this is
just took
going in
the
the
ladder,
Talmud."
you know? I just took the ladder away. I didn't kill him. I
What a
just
little
took the ladder.
trickster.
And then we have blasphemies against Jesus. his mother, the Virgin Mary, and Christians in general. So they have a derogatory word um, for Jesus, and I'm only going to explain it, and then after which I won't use it. I'll just use the name Jesus. But they call him Yashu, which is an acronym for a Jewish curse. So again, a spell and a curse. May his name be wiped out forevermore. So there is a Hebrew translation for that. I didn't include it. I beg your pardon.
They don't seem to like this Jesus fella.
No, they're not a fan. He he was there to hold them accountable, and they like being accountable to no one but their own free will, so to speak. And we'll get into some of that a little bit later. So Jesus is in hell, being boiled in hot excrement, Gittin 57a. And if you ask Jews about this, they will admit that that was once included in the Talmud, but they took it out after the Pope said, "Hey guys, it's harder to defend you with this document saying Jesus is being boiled in hot excrement, semen, I believe, as well." And they say,
Who's semen and who's excrement?
uh, I want to say that of humans and animals, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, is there like a collective of people that are in hell that are all jerking off and shitting together? Is there someone specific that they have in mind?
And that's interesting because they don't necessarily even believe in an afterlife, but Jesus is in hell, which is very, again, one of those things where they don't believe in hell, but Jesus is in hell. They, you know, shouldn't cheat on their wives unless they're fucking an animal. Um, yeah, very very interesting culture. We'll come to see, and a lot of this has progressed exponentially. Not only were they engaging in perverse and unholy acts in times past, they began to become magnified and far more widespread than they previously were um, through Zabbatai Zevi and his Sabbatean movement, which we'll come to see. So Jesus was cut off from the Jewish people for his wickedness, and he refused to repent. That's from Sotah 47a. And Miriam the hairdresser had sex with many men. That's Shabbath 104b in the Hebrew edition only. She, who was the descendant of princes and governors, the Virgin Mary, played the harlot with carpenters. They'd also say that Mary was impregnated by a Roman soldier, and that's where Jesus came from,
So that's
and that she
okay.
was
I
a
just
whore.
heard that. Where did I just hear that about the Roman soldier thing and like how he had a brother also that
I,
was
I'm I can't necessarily say I don't have that story in front of me, but I do understand that from the perspective of Talmudic Jews, that wasn't the only Roman soldier she slept with, and that she was essentially an uncouth woman who was quite promiscuous.
so this is where that thing came from about Mary being a prostitute.
Yes.
Ah, okay. Well, that would make sense.
Oh, 100%. And
'Cause I
then
didn't remember that in the Bible.
no, I don't think that's Old Testament, no, or Torah for that matter, the first five books. So finally, just to put a nice little bow on this little just discussion on the top, jump back to discussing Sabbatai Zevi. Christians who reject the Talmud will go to hell and be punished there for all generations. That's Rosh Hashanah 17a. So again, we go to hell. So in 1648 in Smyrna, at the age of 22, um, Zevi declared himself the Jewish Messiah in Smyrna, citing a Zohar passage predicting redemption in 1648. And this was influenced by 17th century millenarianism, particularly English and Dutch Calvinist expectations of 1666 as an apocalyptic year. And he kind of played on this in order to garner his following initially. So he performed provocative acts such as pronouncing the tetragrammaton, which is the name of God, which you're not supposed to speak in um, traditional Jewish beliefs. It's forbidden except by the high priests on Yom Kippur, or as I discussed previous talk, crossing a river. Two of them say to one another, each other's ear, whisper.
You're
Sounds.
breaking up a little bit. I don't know if it's because your mic's not facing your mouth, or that
Is
might
that a, is that a little bit better?
uh keep talking.
Could be we're getting the YouTube treatment for dropping some of this knowledge.
You're coming through good. I don't know if maybe just your mic or your cable was loose or something, but it came through good now, but occasionally you break up. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
No, I appreciate you addressing that because we want to make sure this information gets across. We don't want to miss anything important when discussing this.
All right. So we were at him saying the forbidden words and him claiming he could fly.
Correct. One of his claims is that he could fly. He told his followers they were unworthy to witness it. He he shared these claims with an Isaac Silveira and Moses Pinheiro, the grandfather of Rabbi Joseph Ergis. And his bold behavior garnered resentment amongst the rabbinic leadership headed by Joseph Escapa, resulting in his excommunication and eventual banishment from Smyrna. Some say it's debatable whether it was 1651 or 1654. But after his banishment from Smyrna, Zevi's whereabouts are uncertain. But by 1658, he surfaced in Constantinople. And there he met a Talmudic scholar by the name of Abraham Yakini and Joseph Trani. And they supported and backed Zevi. So Yakini allegedly forged a manuscript called The Great Wisdom of Solomon, claiming a divine voice prophesied Zevi's birth in 1626 as the Messiah who would defeat the great dragon and sit on God's throne. This document bolstered Zevi's claims as he was looking to build up his following after leaving Smyrna. So he chose to move to Salonika, which is now Thessaloniki in Greece, which happened to be a Kabbalistic hub. And again, proclaiming himself the Messiah, hosting mystical events. One of the things he did was marry the Torah, which he called Ein Sof, one without end. As a result, he was expelled by Salonica's rabbis, led by Abraham de Botton. Then he moved to Cairo, where he lived for about 2 years. In Cairo, he befriended Raphael Joseph Halabi, and this is where his financial backing, which catapults him in the years to follow, is established. And Halabi backed Zevi's messianic claims, enhancing his influence. Halabi was a wealthy mint master and tax farmer. Was also a practicing Kabbalist. During this period, Zevi learned of a Jewish orphan from Helmanitsky in Poland. She had moved to a convent in Amsterdam and then lived in Livorno, reportedly as a prostitute. And Zevi, believing he was destined to marry her, Zevi claimed that in a dream, she was revealed to him as his consort, and he sent for her and married her at Halabi's home. And interpreting her past as a sign of his messiahship, akin to the prophet Hosea's marriage to a wife of whoredom. So Zevi moves to Jerusalem, resuming these aesthetic practices like fasting and singing psalms or Spanish love songs, and he would include mystical interpretations of these things. Again, attracting more followers. But the Jerusalem Jewish community, burdened by Ottoman taxes, sent Zevi to Cairo to appeal to Halabi for funds. And he was successful, securing money, which elevated his prestige, marking the start of his public persona. And his marriage to Sarah, further growing that and solidified his influence. So in 1665, he makes way to Gaza. And so he'll end up spending some time in Gaza, Aleppo, and back in Smyrna. And in Gaza, Zevi met Nathan Benjamin Levi, or Nathan of Gaza, who became a key supporter of his. And that Nathan of Gaza had declared himself the risen Elijah, and proclaiming that the Messianic age would begin in 1666, with Zevi leading the 10 lost tribes back to the Holy Land on a lion with a 7-headed dragon.
I'm sorry, hold on a second. So this guy does a lot of traveling. Before he met his rich friend, how was he paying for being able to go and move all over this between continents?
That's a good question. Like in that early period, there was a maybe 4 to 7 year gap where not much is known about where he was. But it seemed from what I understand and have gathered, he was quite well spoken and had a degree of charisma, which he used to influence people of the time who were heavily influenced by the idea of the, the second coming of the Messiah. Jews have this, or their Messiah. I wouldn't even say it's the second coming because that would be Christian. So the coming of their Messiah, the fulfillment of all prophetic scriptures, because they don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. So they're still waiting for their Messiah. So to call it the second coming would be inaccurate. So, like to this day, Jews are doing everything they can to lay the groundwork for what we would consider the Antichrist. For instance, the breeding of certain breed of cow, which they've funded these Texas ranchers to start a project on, which would present three cows red, unblemished, so they don't have a single white hair on their body.
I think it's only just one because they were talking about that today when I was that podcast I was telling you today with Jake Shields and that guy making that documentary about vegetarianism and Christianity. And there's like he did bring up how there's like a whole like there's billionaires that are dedicated to this, like, and also including guys in our government that truly believe this. They're like really looking forward to tearing down Al Aqsa mosque
And
and
rebuilding the third temple. Yeah.
with a fucking red heifer, and they're actually like paying like good amounts of money to try to breed this thing.
Because allegedly, according to their idea of what will transpire, they need this red heifer in order to to bless the temple.
Okay.
So they essentially can't open the doors of the temple without without this, or I don't maybe even build it without this. So I'm not quite clear on that, but it's either they can't build it or they can't open the doors without it.
What happens if they do get this red heifer and then somebody fucks its shit up and like makes it unable to be sacrificed at the temple?
Well, I would think that would be awesome, but how they would react would be quite interesting. I don't think they would be happy about
Like kicking a pile of
it.
ants.
Yeah, it might stir the hornet's nest, but they're going quite out of their way to procure this particular animal. So Benjamin Levi is backing Zevi. Zevi has the financial support of Halabi, but the the Jerusalem rabbis, led by figures like Abraham de Botton, threatened excommunication, prompting Zevi to leave for Smyrna via Aleppo, where he was enthusiastically received. So back in Smyrna during Rosh Hashanah 1665, Zevi publicly declared himself the Messiah, again in a synagogue, accompanied by shofar blasts and shouts of "Long live our King, our Messiah." So shofar is a ram's horn that they use to almost like a trumpet. So he assumed the title of Amira, our Lord and King, His Majesty be exalted. It is an acronym for. He deposed Rabbi Aaron Lapapa and appointed Chaim Benavista or Viste as Smyrna's rabbi. So at this point, he's able to insert individuals of influence and boot other rabbis out of power. So he's coming quite influential as we can see. Um, his movement began to spread to Italy, Germany, the Netherlands, Hamburg, Amsterdam, and prominent rabbis like Isaac Abeob de Fonseca, Moses Rafael de Aguilar, Moshe Ben Yonatan Galante. If you notice, some of those names are notably Iberian, which harkens on the previous episode of conversos and Jews who outwardly practiced outwardly practiced Catholicism, but were truly Jews in secret. But they have some Spanish last names. There's Moses Ben Mordecai Zacuto, another Benjamin Musafia. So Zevi and his followers promoted sin as holy, believing debauchery hastened the Messiah's arrival. They practiced wife sharing, orgies, adultery, and incest, as well as feasting on days of fasts.
I feel like one
So,
of those isn't like the others.
I mean, on days of fasts, some people may have a little bit of water or snack on something if they're feeling a little bit under the weather or peckish.
Or
But
fuck your dad.
yeah, it's not quite the same as banging your daughter or your 2-year-old neighbor, as we've discussed in the Talmud. They believe they can have sex with children under 3 because the hymen will heal itself of the little girl, which is
That
just,
makes me
again,
pretty upset.
it should. And again, this is like legalese. Just because the young girl's hymen will heal doesn't mean that practice should be
I hate these people so much.
condoned. Yeah, it's quite evil when you dig into
Oh god.
their view of the world and how they view all non-Jews. They're even raping their own children, as we've seen. There's been uh,
This is
quite a
worse than
few.
the fucking Thailand prostitutes
Oh,
episode I did.
it's. I think this takes the cake,
Oh
and
god.
I beg your pardon. We had to start here, but this kind of lays the foundation of what would become the origins of Freemasonry being
Oh, why
Jacob.
not?
Well, Jacob Frank is actually a big fan and big fan of Zabbatai Zevi and almost was like the second Jewish Messiah. So we'll get into that a little bit. But
uh
and as we know, the elites often practice these things, and many of which are practicing since they engage in incest and things of that nature. So um, this this practice of wife sharing, orgies, adultery, and incest, um, it's exemplified by Shmuel, son of Shlomo, who confessed in a rabbinical court to encouraging his wife to have sex with Herschel, and their blasphemous benediction, "Who permits the forbidden," later became like kind of the basis for Aleister Crowley's "Do What Thou Will." But back to Zevi in 1666, Zevi arrived in Constantinople after being forced out of Smyrna by officials. Nathan of Gaz's prophecy that Zevi would take the Sultan's crown led to his immediate arrest by the Grand Vizier, Fazil Ahmed Pasha. He was imprisoned initially in Constantinople, but Zevi was treated well, possibly due to bribes. And his followers, including Nathan and Abraham Yakini, spread reports of his miraculous activities. After 2 months, he was moved to the castle prison at Abydos in Hellespont, renamed Migdal Oz, Tower of Strength, by his followers. There, arriving before Passover, he violated halakha by eating uh, Ashko lamb with its fat and blessed God for restoring the forbidden. With funds from wealthy followers like Halabi, the charm of his prostitute wife, Zevi displayed near royal splendor in prison. He lived quite lavishly while in prison. His followers declared fasts like the 10th of Tevan, 17th of Tammuz, and Tisha B'Av, which was his birthday, as feast days, planning to abolish much of the halakha by partaking in this antinomian act. So Samuel Primo, Zevi's secretary, issued a circular, yes, like a newspaper or a document in 1666 proclaiming Zevi's appearance as the Messiah, urging Jews to turn mourning into joy. In September 1666, Nehemiah HaKohen, a Polish Kabbalist, visited Zevi in Abydos, but declared him an impostor. Nehemiah escaped to Constantinople, pretended to convert to Islam, and then informed the Kaimakam of Zevi's ambitions. I didn't translate what a Kaimakam was. I assume it's like the people responsible for justice and assume police, so to speak, or advisors to the Sultan. So Zevi was taken into Andreopolis, where on September 16, 66, the Grand Vizier, Fazil Ahmad Pasha, representing the Sultan Mehmed the Fourth, gave him three choices: face a trial of divinity, which was surviving a volley of arrows, um, be impaled, or convert to Islam. Zevi chose conversion. Some people say that when he had a conversation with Pasha, he relayed to him that it would be in Constantinople's best interest not to not to persecute him, that it would be best if he just had the option to convert to Islam rather than beheading him, because in doing so, he would um, invoke the ire of Jews around the world, um, causing potential harm to his kingdom by doing so. So this is again speculation, but some people have made this case. So Zevi chooses conversion, donning a turban and adopting the title of Effendi and receiving a generous pensioner as a doorkeeper. Sarah and about 300 of his followers and families also converted, becoming known as the Donme. Donme and um, then and in the present times are a group of converts. The word Donme means converts in Turkish, but it's also related to a specific group of people today who are still followers of Zabbatai Zevi. And some say that they were involved in the slaughter of Armenians during the Armenian genocide in the times that and decades that preceded the Armenian genocide, Armenians being a nation of Christians. So, despite his conversion, Zevi, as we know, like all Jews do, they subvert, they don't convert. He uh, he oscillated between acting as a pious Muslim, but also as a Jew behind closed doors, and the occasions he would visit synagogues. He was heard preaching and and practicing. And in March 1668, during Passover, he claimed a revelation from the Holy Spirit, asserting that he was the true Messiah despite his conversion. And he was claiming his goal was to convert Muslims to Judaism, while he told the Sultan he was converting Jews to Islam. Okay.
By the
So
way, this makes me think of that Rabbi Shmuley guy. Is this where this guy gets like is is everyone that does that fucking the arm wrap thing and the little hat, are they all like uh
they're Kabbalists as well as Talmudic. Anyone who partakes in the Telephon is Talmudic and often a Kabbalist as well. If I'm talking like 98% of them, if they follow the Talmud, they're going to be practitioners of Kabbalah.
but do they all just go down the same path? Like
I would say so.
because I feel like it's just like I keep thinking about that Rabbi Shmuley guy and just like selling dildos with your daughter and
Yeah.
um I I don't see how that's a great practice and it just it that's such a weird it's like an entity that's like possessing these people traveling through time and they just like are either trying to be like this guy or there's something like at the core of this where they just all have to act like that.
I, I would probably say that they are still practicing Sabbateans. I would not be surprised if Shmuley was a practicing Sabbatean. Not at all. So
Jesus Christ. Slav in the chat said that Rabbi Shmuley has a podcast where his daughter they talk about her getting fucked. That's wild.
again, very disturbing and evidence of his Zabbatean influences on his life, his halakha, his way of operating as a Jew. So the Ottomans, tiring of Zevi's antics, ended his salary and exiled him to what is in modern days is a small town in Montenegro. His wife Sarah died there in 1674. He married a woman named Esther, uh, daughter of Rabbi Joseph Philosoph of Thessaloniki. And in August 1676, Zevi wrote to the Jewish community in Albania requesting religious books. He died shortly after, possibly on the 17th, 1676 on Yom Kippur, maybe not. But he was in isolation. His tomb is believed to be in Berat at a Sufi lodge. For those unaware of Sufism, it is a branch and sect within Islam, if I'm not mistaken, Sunni Islam. And what they do is they dance around in circles. That their the practice is known as the whirling dervish. They wear a fez on their hat, which is associated with Shriners, um, the group above Freemasonry, which own the children's hospitals. And he, after his death, his his following doesn't necessarily die out, but it continues on through the Donmei. And what we'll see is that 41 years after Zevi's death, his followers and people who were of his mindset infiltrated the Masonic guilds in England, and they established Freemasonry as a vehicle for their influence. Similarly, in the manner in which Jews were responsible for the formation of the Jesuit order, in the same manner, Jews were at the core of founding and influencing Freemasonry. And again, Jacob Frank being what could be considered their second Messiah, continued these practices going forward. So by the 19th century, the Donmei and descendants of Zevi's converted followers were prominent in Thessaloniki's tobacco and textile trades. They were establishing schools and community programs and committees like the Committee of Union and Progress, also known as the Young Turks. And after Thessaloniki became part of Greece in 1912, the 1923 population exchange forced most of the Donmei back to Turkey, where they assimilated. Many people believe that first president of Turkey was a Donmei. You can actually even find that on Wikipedia. It mentions it, but they say that it's again a conspiracy theory. So which means it's true. And so they eventually split into two sects: the Karakas with Sufi influence practices, and the Kapanisis, who are secular. So there's people that say that they no longer have political influence. I find that to be hogwash. And the reason you can see this is the case is the house in Izmir near Agora associated with Zevi was restored after being in ruins as recently as 2015. So it was brought back to its former glory.
This kind of supports with that one guy we were watching. I think you were probably there. The guy that I think his name is it Robert O'Connell? I know his last name's O'Connell. That someone tuned me into, where he basically everything he says like everyone in the Middle East is Jewish, and like that really kind of substantiates that if that's true, of like all of these people being in this like weird fucking just cult slash mafia. And it's so weird that just hearing all of this, that Christianity and is related to is a religion that's compared to all of these other things where like uh, Christianity just like you just worship God and you try to like practically be a good person, like the
Be like
practicality
Jesus.
of it.
Yeah.
And then every single other religion is casting spells, fucking forming circles, trying to raise beings, and like it really I don't even understand how it's anything like how they put it in the same terms as any of this other shit.
And just to touch on that subject, as we know, practitioners of Islam take the Hajj to Mecca, and when at Mecca they walk, I believe, counterclockwise around the Kaaba being the black cube which has a meteorite embedded in it. And as we know, the black cube is associated with Saturn. It's the same black cube which the Jews wear on their forehead when um, engaging in uh, Tikkunum and chanting and invoking demons. Uh, it's fair to say, not necessarily knowingly, maybe not all practitioners of Islam are aware that they're doing this, but they are paying homage to Saturn when doing so. So just to kind of wrap up Zevi real quick, he's forced to convert to Islam in 1666, later on in the year, under threat of death by the Sultan. He outwardly converted to survive persecution. However, his practices behind closed doors were that of someone who was still a practicing Jew and Kabbalist. His movements and actions were rooted in Kabbalah and the Talmud, and he promoted heretical practices like the idea that sin was holy and the way to hasten the Messiah's arrival. The Messiah being the person in the Bible we would consider the Antichrist.
I go and I don't know all these things, and I don't have like this, like the same animosity. Like I don't like these people, but I certainly not at the point that you're at where you
Well,
know all of these things, and
when
then
you know this stuff, it gets a little harder not,
and it's
to feel
like
this way.
I trying to give you guys credit. I'm trying to like it's not that bad. And then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And like it's like you've got to turn everything upside down. You have to fucking like worship the devil. Like can't you just chill? Can
This
you
is
cut out like not can you all right, you can fucking try to trick God with your fucking dishes by selling them to some idiot goyim for a weekend or whatever it is, so that you're not actually using your own dishes in your house that have touched bread or whatever. But can you guys at least cut out like the fucking 2 year olds and worshiping planets and like just like
I
the
I don't
sacrifices
believe
and
they
shit?
can. I believe that they've made a pact at a certain time and that they've made it a core principle and part of their way of life, their halakha. It's essentially the Jewish way of operating. And once people understand this,
This is
um,
this is like
the,
when I told you the other day of when I wake up every morning and I dread my drive to work and I dread my drive home back from work, and I try to reset every day of not viciously hating a certain melanated people that fill my car up with their fucking weed smoke at 7 in the morning because I'm driving behind them. And I just get reminded every time I talk to you. I'm like, I hate these people, dude. Like, I fucking hate them.
and I, I'm in the same position you are, where when I watch the news or I go to church today and I see a gentleman with a pin with the American and Israeli flag on it, I I just need to send him this document, this 27-page document that I put together, and see if he still wears that pin. If he does, he's a fucking retard, and God bless him. But there's only so much you can help people if they're not willing to not willing to stare at what's directly in front of them. The information is available, but to get to this depth, they have to go down the path. Most of the time, they'll just categorize this information as anti-Semitic off the bat, and not even be willing to look at it. Unfortunately,
Did you ever see the episode of the King of the Hill when like the mom starts dating the Jewish guy?
no,
It just
great show.
Yeah, you got to see that episode because I'm just thinking about like the guy, like Bobby wants to start being like him, starts talking like him, and like
Oh no.
kvetching and shit. And it's just it. It's every one of these people just like why can't you just leave us alone? Why can't you just not do these things? Can't you just be normal? Like why can't you be normal?
Well, they're actually a lazy parasitic people who don't believe in labor. They believe that it's the goyim's job to work for them. And according to the Talmud, they get 2,800 slaves when their Messiah comes.
Yeah, you said
And
that before.
we either convert to the Noahide laws, which is we're not allowed to convert to Judaism. We convert to their Noahide laws, or we would be beheaded.
How do you personally like my you seen Clockwork Orange?
Yeah, great
Sometimes I
film.
get these visions in my head of just ultra
Ultra
violence,
violence. Yeah.
and I'm just sitting there like in the library reading the Bible. And how do you, knowing all this stuff, just not put a sword on your hilt and just go and just start massacring people with a fucking sword? Like I just
So
that's the
the
first vision that's in my head right now of just fucking going around with a
let
sword.
let me just say the thoughts crossed my mind. That exact thought. And but the idea is I'm waiting for a few more people to wake up before we pull out our swords because um I'm looking to hopefully see a world without their influence in time, and I can't be the only one picking up my sword. And I mean that figuratively
I'm
and literally.
assembling a team of autistic kids with swords and
So we're now going to be diving into what we'll see later on. We saw it through Zabbatai Zevi and the Sabbatean Frankus, who became the Donme Islamists in outward appearance, but Jews in practice, similarly to the Jesuits, who were Catholics in outward appearance, but Jews in practice. And we'll start to see a little bit of that and its influence on Christianity through Freemasonry. So they're again chameleons, individuals acting as practitioners of Christianity or Islam, but secretly pursuing their satanic Jewish agenda. And we'll see that influence through Jacob Frank and who influenced Freemasonry and the formation of the Bavarian Illuminati.
as we get into that, by the way, this is the second time you brought that up of the influence on Freemasonry. Is it the influence of the creation of Freemasonry, or is it Freemasonry existed and then you
I
have the influence?
I believe it existed prior, if I'm not mistaken. Freemasonry was founded in 1717, and
So I asked you this question before, though, about Freemasonry being corrupted, because when we watched that documentary on it, I don't know if you remember me asking you this about how, like, it, at least from the tenants originally, what we were watching, aside from it being a lie or differentiating from like Christianity, was it always bad, or did they
I
like
believe in its early formation, it probably was founded by good men, and it was um, alleged to have been formed as a way to pass on information through guilds, essentially like modern day unions. They claim that if you were a stonemason or one of the builders of these cathedrals, you would join the local lodge. This allowed you to get work and travel from one country to the next and find work through the Masonic lodge system.
That
So
makes a little bit more sense.
this is what's said is kind of at the core of the early foundation, and it's in the manner in which it's presented to the public. But Freemasons will also tell you that the, the 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 rites and rituals of Freemasonry go back to um, the Euclidean mystery schools in Alexandria in Egypt. So I didn't include that in this particular talk, but um, I was going through quite a few various websites, many of which popped up in the early searches before I had to get down to page 2 or 3 to find the data I was searching for. But I came across many Freemasonic websites which alluded to this. So Jacob Frank was born in 1760, and I'm not sure if he was initially a practicing Catholic, but he convinced the bishop of his diocese, I assume he was Catholic, that his people were not Jews, but they were anti-Talmudists. And he ordered that all of the books be burned. I want to say Jewish books, I suppose. And then he said that I will bring you lots of new Catholics. And pardon, he may have been born a little earlier. I may be getting his birth incorrect. But it says by 1759 he brought 5,000 people, and Jews of Europe were becoming Catholic publicly, although they, as we know, despise Catholicism. There were converts by the thousands, probably tens of thousands, if not more, by the 18th century. And the idea of the purification of the soul through orgies, um, again, Sabbatean. So he he expanded Sabbateism into a cult that controlled the minds of people through sex and blackmail and incestuous practices. And these are some of the things that will go on to be included in Freemasonry. So Frank ran out of money in 1785, but a pact was made. And according to some people, he may have gotten chummy with Amschel Rothschild, because by 1786, he had moved to Offenbach in Frankfurt, the home of Amschel Rothschild and Adam Weishaupt. Adam Weishaupt being the founder of the Bavarian Illuminati. So the Bavarian Illuminati was founded in 1776, the same year as the Declaration, pardon me, I think the Declaration of Independence was a year or so earlier, but the formation of the United States. It's quite interesting that the formation of the United States coincided with the formation of the Bavarian Illuminati. So in 1786, the Rothschilds weren't at the wealth level they are today. This was Amschel's um, banking dynasty in its early times. His sons are the ones that made the Rothschild family wealthy. I believe it was 5 sons who went out, um, London, Frankfurt, um, Amsterdam, Paris, Brussels, if I'm not mistaken. So the idea is that Amschel and Frank became um, cohorts, and the Rothschilds helped Frank, and Frank wanted to Jews and non-Jews to accept the Messiah of the Sabbatean ilk. And what they did was they decided to infiltrate the Freemasonic lodges. So through the wealth and influence of his sons and through the Jewish practice of being a people of no nation, but in every nation, they began to establish Masonic orders and gain positions of influence through bribery, blackmail, and sex, similar to practices of Zabbatai Zevi. So, Freema the Illuminati's banned, and what they do is they just get up and leave and move their organization into other positions of influence, and they use Freemasonry. And the Illuminati somewhat goes underground and becomes a true secret society, so to speak. They didn't necessarily have public meetings or information that could be delved into publicly, but the lodges were um, something you could go and knock on a Freemason lodge and become a member if you ask. So, for those not aware, in order to become a Freemason, all you need to do is ask to become a Freemason. You need two Freemasons to vouch for you. And you can also become a Freemason if your father or grandfather was a Freemason. But again, you need two people to vouch for you. So, the idea being that before the 1800s, there was no conspiracy about Freemasons, and that they were a builders guild, and that they were good folks and they backed the builders and the unions throughout Europe. But then you begin to see the organization upending nations.
Oh, when you were talking about that, do you know anything about coffee houses and the origin of them?
I assume they were probably in some capacity drug dens or ways of um, getting individuals to work together to do business deals, engage in um, secretive practices, kind of like the clubhouses we see in England, where you have to be a member, but in order to be a member, you need to be quite affluent, and this is where many business deals get done.
Yeah, so AI overview of the history of coffee houses. Coffee houses emerged in the Middle East around 15th century, spreading to Europe in the 17th century, where they became important social and intellectual, particularly during the Enlightenment. Initially, they were places for political discussion and debate, sometimes facing attempts at suppression due to their perceived subversive nature. Over
Yep.
time, coffee houses evolved into the centers for business, literary activity, and even the beginnings of modern financial markets. Now, that kind of matches the timeline of what you're talking about, and would also kind of uh, what's funny is they were originally like basically like the meetings like you're talking about, and they kind of got ruined because women started wanting to be involved. And but it's funny because if you think about like where do all like the fucking Marxist, like socialist fag F words um all go meet now? It's fucking Starbucks and these fucking coffee
Coffee houses.
places. Isn't that
Spot
so
on.
weird? I'm not saying, it's actually like connected, but that's such a weird like uh just pattern of behavior.
And as you can see, these practices have continued throughout time, and now they've become the social clubs, the lodges, and also the Starbucks meeting where these people um, collude, conspire, and lay down the foundations for the shaping of society through financial and political means.
Maybe you Mormons are onto something about this not drinking coffee.
Well, if you get into certain schools of thought, people will tell you that Freemasonry had a major influence on the early formation of the LDS Church, but we'll save that for another day. Um, what I did want to jump into is some quotes associated with Freemasonry. So there's an idea that Freemasonry is Judaism for Gentiles. Um, it's a place where men who seek to get a leg up, who are traitors to their nation and their people, can get an advantage by betraying their fellow citizens, their culture, and their community. All they have to do is sell their soul. So there's a gentleman by the name of Gordon Smith. I don't recall what he wrote, but he wrote regarding the relationship of Freemasonry with Judaism. Jews have entirely created Masonry to corrupt the nations of Christian civilizations and to propagate behind this veil the general revolution, which is to bring about the domination of Israel. It is simply a tool and a means in the hands of the Jews. So he says it's at the creation, and that may very well be the case, but it may not. Again, that's debatable. But in support of this, we can we can quote an article by Rabbi Dr. Isaac M. Weiss, or Wise, published in the Israelite of America on August 3rd, 1866. Masonry is a Jewish institution whose history, degrees, charges, passwords, and explanations are Jewish from beginning to end. And that can be found in Vicomte Leon de Ponce's The Secret Power Behind the Revolution, Freemasonry, and Judaism, uh, in the 1996 reprint of the 1929 edition on page 101. So, when able, I try and put sources so that people, should they choose to, can go back and research these things and verify that this information is accurate. Um, there's a reason that many of these quotes are quite prevalent on Twitter and the internet. It's because they've been verified. That one being one of the cases. So on page 249 of Duncan's Ritual and Monitor, it states that Masonry is subservient to Judaism, noting that a recipient of the Royal Arch degree pledges himself for the good of Masonry generally, but the Jewish nation in particular. Okay. Masonry is based on Judaism. Eliminate the teachings of Judaism from the Masonic ritual, and what is left? That's found in the Jewish Tribune, New York, October 28th, 1927, volume 91, number 18. So that's from a Jewish source. again, we've quoted Rabbi Dr. Isaac Weiss, and this is again from the Jewish Tribune. Masonry is based on Judaism. Eliminate the teachings of Judaism from the Masonic ritual, and what is left?
What is the
So
difference between Catholicism and fucking like the upper level, like the upper levels of Catholicism and Masonry? It seems so similar.
I would say that there's many correlations, and as we know, the Jesuit order steered and influenced the Catholic Church at a certain time, eventually took it over. There's been, I think, at least 4 or 5 Jewish popes that have been documented, and the cardinals and the Pope wear the yarmulke. They also the Pope wears the I believe it's Dagon, which is the Babylonian fish head hat that was worn by the Watchers. Um, they have the symbol of the pine cone, which is found in the hands of the Watchers in Babylon, which is again the fallen angels, the individuals. The bag that they're carrying is the knowledge that was passed down to man.
Well, the pine cone is a Dionysian.
It again found in diet in the Mithric schools, the schools of Dionysus. It's the same motif, just sometimes tweaked ever so slightly, or not at all. They just pick it up. Oh, we use that. They use that. We all use this. It's just a coincidence. So they'll tell you it's very much a Catholic thing, but it's not. They're wearing the Dagon hat, the hat that was associated with
Yeah, I've seen that before.
as well as the pine cone, and which can be found uh, at the Vatican in Vatican City. So, to speak of another quote, technical language, symbolism, and rites of European Freemasonry are full of Jewish ideas and terms. In the Scottish Rite, the dates of official documents are given according to the year and months of the Jewish calendar, and use is made of the Hebraic alphabet. That's from the Jewish Encyclopedia, 1903, Volume 5, page 50. So they're telling you in the Jewish Encyclopedia, again, Jewish sources, the entire thrust of Masonic activity is motivated by Jewish resentment. The adept is led from secret to secret into the Judaized religion of Freemasonry, and from secret to secret into the whole Japinical code of revolution, Jacobite code of revolution. Freemasonry is the crucial link between the ancestral Jewish hatred of Christ and revolution. That's a quote by Michael Jones, E. Michael Jones, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit in the Fealty Press, page 542. This quote I found was very interesting. To become initiated into the higher degrees of Freemasonry, the adept must agree to become an assassin. He must be willing to assassinate Christ and his representatives on earth. That's in the
It's
Ibid.
nice.
Yeah. Page 541, found in the Ibid. Theodore Herzl, the founder of Zionism. This is the quote I shared with Danny that he was curious about its origin. In 1897 in Switzerland, he said Masonic lodges established all over the world offered to help us achieve our independence. Those pigs, the non-Jewish Masons, will never understand the final object of Masonry.
And they're the creators of terrorism, is Zionism. That's where
100%.
terrorists started.
Terrorists started with Irgun, Lehi, and I forget the name of the other terrorist organization, but um, all prime ministers of Israel, I think, aside from
Lakud?
uh,
Is it Lakud?
no, it's something with an H,
Okay.
like Haganah or something
Haganah,
like
yeah,
that.
Haganah, the Haganah. And as you were talking about that also up there, about the Scottish right, it's kind of interesting to see maybe that's where Trump gets this loyalty to the Jews,
Mm,
um, because of his Scottish ancestry. And I wonder what kind of like shenanigans have been like long in play with getting him elected and that supposed little Baron Trump book, that like if this has really been like that long play
mm.
of getting this uh Kabbalist crypto Jew to
Very, very much so. It's always the long game with them. They Sabbatean or pardon me, the Frankists, their their symbol is the tortoise, and essentially that slow and steady wins the race. And they also are associated with the wolf in sheep's clothing. So again, those are two symbols and images that are associated with Frankists. So the earliest Jewish settlers in the New World, when we speak of the New World, in this instance, we're speaking of the United States. But as we know, Jews, when they left or were expelled from Spain, they went to the New World. Christopher Columbus was a Jew, or Cristobal Colon was a Jew, and the slave trade and sugar plantations founded in the Caribbean were um, Jewish ran and owned and backed by the crown. And at that point, Jews were beginning to influence their role in the New World. So the earliest Jewish settlers brought Freemasonry with them to the United States. 15 Jewish families arrived in Newport, Rhode Island from Holland, and they brought with them the continent's first Masonic lodge. And descendants of these Jews originally from Spain and Portugal went into the whaling industry and founded some of the first families in New England. Um, the official coat of arms for I believe it's the United English Grand Lodge, or I had deleted the original name, and right here I just have English Grand Lodge. But the official coat of arms, even to this day, is one that was made in 1675 by Rabbi Jacob Yehuda Leon, known as Templo, who went from Holland to England that year. And the code is entirely composed of Jewish symbols, explains Dr. Lucian Wolf. It's an obvious attempt to display heretically the various forms of the cherubim pictured to us in the second visions of Ezekiel. And for those that know, a cherubim, I believe, has four wings and four faces: the face of an ox, a man, a lion, and an eagle. And it's associated with the orders of angels. I believe cherubim being third in the hierarchy, but it's associated in this case with Jewish mysticism. And if you look at this coat of arms, you'll see that the legs of the angels, if I'm not mistaken, have the hindquarters of goats with hairy haunches and cloven hooves, and they're standing on and treading upon the motto holiness to the Lord. So again, a symbol of their their hate for who we consider the Lord.
Can they just make an attempt at the very least, just to not like, just not to fucking stress me out by making me hate them in every single direction and angle of their like entire motto? Like, does everything have to suck about these people? Can't you have like one redeeming quality?
Um, I don't
No.
know. No, no. Like even when looking at and thinking about some of the movies I've enjoyed, there's often very Jewish undertones. I shared with you a video about the film Gattaca, which essentially describes Gattaca as a case for the Jew stealing from the Olympian, the Caucasian European, assuming his identity, and then at the end, the the character identified as the European sacrifices himself for the Jew, and he's burnt alive. So it's very much like a Jewish ritual in the film. So the more I think about it, no, there's not a damn thing they do that's decent. And, um,
The only thing I
I,
can remember about Schindler's List is those big Kazarian milkers that they made us watch in fucking eighth grade.
uh, luckily, I didn't partake. I didn't watch that film until I was I don't know. I think I watched it with my mom one time, but I didn't care for it. I've never really been into all the soppy Jew woe is me films. They always bored me.
I would have thought you would.
Yeah. Funny enough, I found out about the Jew problem when I was in fifth grade. So I've been hearing about this information for some time now and got suspended as a result of telling a gal I wish Hitler did the job right. But that's a digression. Um, so
I just imagine some kid with one of those little colorful hats with the propeller on it, just saying, "It's the Jews."
essentially a fifth grader, dropping J bombs, dude. But yeah, so this deception and subversion by Freemasonry begins to manifest itself in the world through Jews. And the idea is though that it's it's far more ancient, and some have said that it prior to or after um Alexandria and Egypt. Some say it's associated with a secret association called the Mysterious Force, which was founded in 443 AD by 9 Jews intent to destroy the teachings and lessons that were given by Jesus Christ, and they wanted to undermine Christianity and and Jesus. And those 9 individuals were King Herod Agrippa, Hiram Abud, Moab Levi, Jacob Abdon, Solomon Abaron, Assad Abia, and 3 known only as Adoniram, Jonathan, and Antipas. So the idea that the conspiracy of 1717, the formation of Freemasonry, was well financed by international Jewry and came into focus through Joseph Levy, who was the heir to the original manuscript of the ancient founder, Moab Levy. So John de Galier and Abraham Aboud in the lineage of the original founder, Hiram Abood. Even those who have risen to the level of the 33rd degree in Masonic rank are unaware of the true satanic and Jewish origins um, that are beholden and organized by the Sanhedrin being the Jewish priestly caste, the Cohens or the Levites of the Bible, the Cohens of today. So even Masons in the lowest lodges, your local lodges, and you know, Podunk, Alabama, um, know not what they do unless they begin to get into the the higher degrees. So there's the window dressing, the first 3 degrees, the lower levels. These are just useful idiots. And those further up the chain, um, considered porch masons or you know m- lower middle management. And then you have your your adepts and initiates who are
I'm just
members of
thinking
the
of
higher degrees.
I'm just thinking of porch mason is a good is a good epithet for a for Jews instead
Well,
of porch monkey,
it,
porch
it
mason.
well, it also like gets into them allowing blacks at a certain time. So when I went to the Freemason information night, when I was considering joining the lodge in my early 20s, but prior to reading the degrees and having the contract in my hand and understanding what it was I was signing my life away to, um, you agree to conform to all ancient rites and rituals of the brotherhood and all ancient rites and rituals of the fraternity, and agree to be of service to your fellow brother. Like that's what I remember being in the contract. I'm like, I don't know about this. This is sketchy. And there was some kid there that looked like, because I had read David Icke's books at this point, and they're talking about fucking kids and doing this weird shit. And I saw this one kid there that looked like he was the kid that got fucked by everyone. It was just like a half retard, like kind of pretty for a boy. You know what I'm like, but you know what I'm saying? Like young, you know what I'm saying? Like effeminate looking. Like it was bad. Like when I saw that dude, I was like, that's the one they're fucking. So that's the first thing that came to my head when I saw this kid. So
I hate these people so much.
um so this is pardon the digression. It's easy to get into some side topics as we go over this, but I mean, as we can see, Freemasonry was involved in the French Revolution, the American Revolution, uh, Bolshevik Revolution, as well as the Civil War. So Masonry at this point begins to become the vessel by which Jews begin shaping the world um, towards their end goals of creating a a global empire dominated and orchestrated by Jews and other individuals who share their satanic um, outlook. So, what you'll find in orders once you come 33rd, 32nd, 30th, 31st, there's an interview with a gentleman who's a Christian and he's outside a Shriners convention, I believe in Tennessee, and he asked the old man about about shrining, and the man starts speaking about Lucifer and saying that Lucifer is righteous and virtuous, and it's a very interesting little 2-minute video where the Shriner, 33rd degree Freemason, in order to be in order to be a Shriner, you have to be 32nd degree at least. So he's at least 32nd degree, and he goes on to say that Lucifer is a virtuous and righteous being, and then the Christian asks him, "Is this the same Lucifer from the Bible?" And the gentleman says, "Yes." He says, "God created Lucifer," and he says, "Yes." So, in their own words, from the horse's mouth. So, when you become a police officer, you'll often be pressed to join the lodge. If you are going to go on to become a leader in the ranks, 100% all chief of police and every single role are Freemasons. Maybe not every officer goes on to join, but it gives them certain protections by doing so, by
Remember,
joining the gang.
do you remember
Oh,
how I said that that Jinsa group that I've been discussing, they're the group, that Jewish group that sends all these police officers over to
yes,
Israel to get
yes.
trained.
So again, those people being Freemasons would know who they are working with, who they are working for, and they eventually, like I had stated when discussing the contract, you agree to conform to all ancient rites and rituals of the fraternity. So these laws, this world that you and I live in, they don't live in, and they operate by their own rules, their own codes, their own um, halakha or customs, Jewish customs, for lack of a better word, because as you and I both discussed just now and know, Freemasonry is very much Jewish, as we've clearly um, laid the groundwork for here today. So, all members of these lodges, all members of these international police forces, things like Interpol, um, the FBI, CIA, uh, are going to have members of Masonic lodges deeply embedded in them. And so, just to go over a few of these institutions and like lower level or offshoots of Freemasonry, you have things like Rotary International. Rotary International was, according to this particular quote, is entirely in the hands of Freemasons. This movement was founded in Chicago in March 1905 by the Freemason Paul Harris, who also belonged to B'nai B'rith. B'nai B'rith is a Freemasonic uh, Jewish order. In order to be a member of B'nai B'rith, you needed to be at least half Jewish, so you couldn't be like a 16th Jew. Like Jews will give you credit for being a Jew if you're 16th Jew, but in order to be a member of B'nai B'rith, you needed to be at least half Jewish. So there's Lions International, which is another. So when I was growing up in my hometown, um, the baseball teams that were sponsored, Rotary was one of the sponsors. I'm going to talk about Kiwanis, which was another sponsor. Lions were the sponsor. So at least three of the baseball teams in like an 8-team league were sponsored by Freemasons or Freemasonic organizations or offshoots. So there's other groups, like I mentioned, the Kiwanis, uh, the Moose Lodge, um, Job's Daughters, which is for women, um, and then the Boy Scouts has also had Freemasonic ties. I discussed the Shriners. Above the Shriners is the Royal Order of the Jesters. The Royal Order of the Jesters is um, a group. who is dedicated to good times, they say. There was this an uncovering of I believe it was in Florida in like 1990s, 1994, something along those
Talking about
lines,
the
where
finders.
no, it was the Royal Order of the Jesters, and they were caught with in a child prostitution um ring. The girls were 13, 14, so not extremely young, but again, um, underage sex with minors. It involved chiefs of police, DAs. Um,
That's not the finders cult.
no, this is the Royal Order of the Jesters,
Oh,
and
okay.
I believe it transpired in the 90s
Do you know
in
what I'm talking about?
the Finders was associated with the Odd Fellows and orphanages, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Well, it was basically kind of what you're describing, and then like the CIA got involved, and I thought that was around the same time, and that was in Florida, and I believe this was up by Pensacola, but it involved a lot of high level officials in the local government. So
Oh, and as we just discussed, it's always going to involve high level officials and local government, the police, the justice system, and local politicians, mayors, treasurers, people of positions of influence. And again, you cannot get into those particular roles unless you are a member of these clubs and organizations. So essentially, Sabbatean Francus and Freemasonry begins exerting its influence on the world. It's behind the American, French, and Russian revolutions. It's behind the creation of the UN and Israel, um, both world wars, the assassination of John Kennedy. Um, they're behind the feminist movement, behind communism. Um, Communist defector Bella Dodd, who received, pardon me, who revealed uh, during the 1930s that the Communist Party had 1,100 members infiltrate the Catholic priesthood, becoming bishops, cardinals, and popes allegedly.
didn't I tell you? Didn't we have this conversation, or maybe this was me and my wife about how like um, Catholics, their confessional booth is basically organized like psyop to gain information.
Oh, 100%. And it's one of the early manners in which the intelligence community was founded. There was an oath that the Jesuits give that I wanted to go over. Um, if I can just find it here in my notes, because I was jumping around a little bit because I didn't want to read some of this stuff verbatim. I just wanted to kind of gloss over certain aspects of it. But
This cult of the all-seeing eye thing, is that the thing with the hand and the eye in there? Is that what you're talking about, or is that a different thing?
they call that the evil eye.
Yeah.
And what that's designed to do is ward off individuals whose negative thoughts and energy is being directed at the Jew. Like if you see a Jew, it's like that fucking Jew. But that's supposed to protect them from your ire, or in my opinion, it's a symbol of appears to be a symbol of Lucifer, the way I look at it, being it's the single eye, and is, as we know, the the single eye is associated with I believe Horus, if I'm not mistaken, as well as Lucifer.
Well, it's ironic that they use that to ward against my ire because I never really I every time I see one of those, I hate that person. And I didn't even really know the entire story behind it. I just know that like every time I've seen somebody that had that symbol on them or had it anywhere like on their body, I was like, "Oh, I for sure hate you. I don't know what it is about you aside from I see this and I know that you're a person I would not mind watching get hit by a train."
Yeah, so that they're often most often Jews, or they practice Kabbalah. So people will also use that symbol who practice Kabbalah, and you'll also see that little red string worn by people who practice Kabbalah.
So that's why Ian Carroll got all that shit.
That's where I got all
Okay.
that shit because he was wearing the
Uh,
fucking the Kabbalah bracelet.
because the
Yeah.
only people that I ever see wearing that stupid eyeball thing are basically like uh aspiring OnlyFans models or girls that want to like be Instagram thoughts or
Well, they're hoping to get recognized by the Jew for doing so, being it's owned by Jews, but also maybe they're hoping that they don't get bad juju for being a whore, and
I think that's more like it because I don't think that these women have that much like you're giving these women too much
too
credit
much credit.
like
Yeah.
that I see wearing this shit.
So before we jump into the next the next topic, I just wanted to briefly discuss B'nai B'rith, and then I wanted to get into the Jesuit oath. So B'nai B'rith, or Sons of the Covenant, is again a Jewish Freemasonic lodge. Leo Frank, the murder of Mary Fagan, who was the individual which was the catalyst for the formation of the ADL. He was a member of B'nai B'rith,
Why not?
and of course he was, right? And um, it's it's a Freemasonry within Freemasonry for Jews, and it was founded under the name Bundesbruder by 12 German Jewish Freemasons on October 1843 at the Saint Germain Cafe in New York. Again, coffee houses. So only Jews and half Jews are admitted to the order, and it works very closely with the Illuminati, and even it's been represented at the UN since its inception. And that's found in Architects of Deception by Yuri Lina on page 344. So I wanted to discuss the Jesuit oath of induction given to I don't know if it's all Jesuits or just high-ranking Jesuits, but it goes as follows. I do further promise and declare that I will, when opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war secretly and openly against all heretics, as I am directed to do, extirpate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, burn, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls in order to annihilate their exorable race. That when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisonous cup, the strangulation cord, the steel of the poignard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the persons, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed to do so by any agents of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood, the Holy Father of the Society of Jesus. So that's
Ah.
basically
Hmm.
giving an oath to be a dirty Jew and do dirty Jew things. And we can see these acts being done to this day, places like occupied Palestine, and they're in the manner in which they deal with medics, journalists, people of honor and dignity, and innocent women and children. So that kind of covers Freemasonry and Sabbatean Frankism. And I wanted to go from here and jump into Zionism and its origins. And this particular source is from a source sympathetic to Jews and basically from the Jewish perspective. But you'll see that some of the information they present will discuss what we previously discussed in the prior two subjects, but from the perspective of a Jew. So Zionism formed as an organized movement, um, generally considered to be fathered by Theodore Herzl in 1897. But we can see that there are instances of early precursors to the Zionist movement, and didn't necessarily start in 1897. In 1160, David Alroy led a Jewish uprising in Kurdistan, which aimed to reconquer the Promised Land. Zabbatai Zevi in 1648 claimed he would lead the Jews back to Israel. In 1868, Judah ben Shalom led a large movement of Yemenite Jews to Israel. And a dispatch from the British consulate in Jerusalem in 1839 reported that the Jews of Algiers and its dependencies were numerous in Palestine. And there was a significant migration from Central Asia by Bukharan Jews. And then, in addition to the Messianic movements, there were Jews, pardon me, Christians who made efforts to support the Jews through the auspices of converting them to Christianity, but in reality were Freemasons and members of the Protestant Reformation here in the United States, not the same Protestant Reformation as Martin Luther, but like what became the evangelical church later on. So, according to like the Jewish perspective, the Age of Enlightenment in Europe led to an 18th and 19th century Jewish Enlightenment movement in Europe called the Haskalah. The 1791 French Revolution led to France becoming the first country in Europe to grant Jews legal equality. So again, Freemasonry was behind the French Revolution and overthrowing the monarchy, which led to France being the first country in Europe to grant Jews legal equality.
You know, there's a city in France. I think they had to change the name in the last like decade or so that like just translated to burn the Jews.
Oh, I didn't. I know there's one in I believe it's Austria, which translates to Jewstone because it was a place where Jews would commit human sacrifice. So I think burn the Jew sounds better, but rather than Jewstone. But so Britain gave Jews equal rights in 1856, Germany in 1871, and the spread of Western liberal ideas began to spread through Europe. For the first time, Jews around Europe were absorbed into communities, and they were dispensers of the ideas of enlightenment, rationalism, romanticism, and nationalism. Again, inversions of what their true motivations were. They were in no way partaking nationalism from the perspective of, say, the French. When they moved to France, they were promoting a Jewish nationalism. So after the formation of these modern nations in Europe, again began prejudice against the Jew. So just keep in mind for this little segment, we're looking at it from the perspective of the Jew. So what had previously been religious persecution um, turned to racial anti-Semitism. And this is, they say anti-Semitism is where this name kind of originates, but as we know, anti-Semitism was a word created by the ADL. And this goes on to say that at this particular time, so this being in the 18th and 19th century, the Catholic press was at the forefront of the efforts by the Vatican um, to undermine the equality that Jews were granted. Um, and nationalist movements began to arise in these particular countries, and Jews experienced pogroms, and this will lead up to what became their persecution in Russia and Jews in Eastern Europe facing persecution under the czars. So from 1791, they were only allowed to live in the Pale of Settlement, as it was known. So in response, the Jews, in their drive for integration and modern education and a movement for emancipation, after the czars imposed tight quotas on schools, universities, and cities, preventing entry by Jews, from the period between 1827 and 1917, prior to the Bolshevik Revolution, uh, Russian Jewish boys were required to serve 25 years in the Russian army, starting at the age of 12, with the intention of forcibly destroying their ethnic identity, um, and eradicate the nature of the Jew, and to bring them into the fold of the country. But as we know, this didn't necessarily work. Eventually led to deep resentment from the Jews of Eastern Europe and Russia, and hatred of the Russian royal family and the czars, leading up to um, the killing of his essentially his entire family. And on the night of July 16th in 1918, uh, and Ekaterinburg, a Bolshevik secret police squad murdered Nicholas Tsar II, um, Tsarista Alexandra, her son Yar Tsarevich, Alexis and their four daughters in a cellar room. The family was killed by gunfire, with the daughters finished off by bayonets. Their bodies were buried in a secret grave to prevent the ability of Orthodox Christians to pay respects to them by giving them a marked grave. So initially, the Bolshevik authorities claimed only Nicholas was shot due to a liberation plot, but it later came to light that the entire family was massacred. And
So it wasn't a good idea to take a group of people into your country and give them citizenship by putting them into your military force as a requirement.
no, it isn't because they were only asked to serve 25 years and they started at 12. So by the time they're 37, they're an adult, still in good fighting age, with a great deal of resentment for the people and the nation of the Republic of Russia.
I'm just wondering about this idea that we have in this country about giving people citizenship by putting them in our military. It's
Ag- Not a good idea.
Jesus fucking Christ, dude. And, like this is part of the problem with the cartels. Like people, like it's a an open secret that like half these fucking people go into like the Marines are like the worst about it. That like they take in all these fucking Mexicans and then they go and transfer their services over to the cartels. It's so fucking insane.
And we happen to have a Jewish Mexican president.
Yeah.
And in the process of her becoming uh, democratically elected, 32 of her opponents were killed, and I think 72 shot at or attempted assassinations, if I'm not mistaken.
It's really odd that the those ICE riots ended right as this whole thing was cooling down for a while with Israel and Iran. It's really odd that all of that coincided. What's odder is that now in Mexico they're not rioting here, but now they're rioting in Mexico
Yes,
and trying to get rid of the Gentiles
kick the white people out of Mexico City and out of Mexico. Yeah,
and what's it called, the gentrification. They're
Th- they're
they're
mad. They're mad about the gentrification as well as the what do they call them? The remote workers who happen to be of a higher earning status than the local population, which are driving out locals. I think it was Sean Strickland. I saw a tweet. He's like, it's funny how well-to-do Americans are moving to Mexico and poor Mexicans are moving to the United States, both disproportionately affecting the native population. And it was a quite an astute observation for a man like Sean Strickland. I didn't think he was capable of such.
I like that guy, by the way. He's
No,
I
I
need
just
to
didn't think
sub
he
to
was a
him.
thinker like that. I didn't think he was a thinker like that. Like I mean, he's not Bryce Mitchell, you know? He's not necessarily digging in the weeds like some guys do. But I thought that was a quite a nice little tweet he put out.
Yeah, I like that guy a lot. I see a lot of like my wife thinks I'm very similar to him.
Well, he's
Um,
a man's man,
yeah,
and he takes no shit, and he does things the way he believes is right, which I think men should do.
his interviews are pretty good if you listen to him. But anyways, you're on the topic of the bodies were buried to prevent a cult around the czar.
Yeah, they wanted to cover it up, but information came out that the entire family was murdered. Um, they initially tried to just say it was the purpose was to liberate the Russian people, as we know through history that that wasn't necessarily the case, and Lenin um, was involved. Some bodyguards, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Evidence Lenin's bodyguard Alexei Akimov showing Lenin and Yakov Sverdlov ordered the execution via telegram. This corroborated in Leon Trotsky's 1918 account, where Sverdlov confirmed Lenin's decision to kill the entire family to prevent them from becoming a rallying point for anti-communists. They didn't want um, any of them to survive because they could, reestablish their place on the throne. And in Robert Wilton's 1920 book, The Last Days of the Romanovs, based on Nikolai Sokolov's 1919 investigation under Alexander Kolchak, it detailed the Jewish Bolsheviks' role, including Yakov Yurovsky, who led execution Jews, and they played a significant role in the early Bolshevik regime, who went around murdering Christians, Orthodox Christians, and rounding up uh, members of the patriarchy and anyone who dissented to the incoming regime. So there's quite a few Jews that played a significant role in the early Bolshevik regime, like Trotsky, who was an American. His name was Lev Bronstein, and he was backed by the Warburgs, if I'm not mistaken. And we'll get into them a little.
You know what's crazy? I kind of didn't think about it, and I just was like, kind of brushed it off. But you're obviously familiar with Solzhenitsyn.
Correct, yes.
When we were talking about earlier about the early days of the Talmud, or what was it, um, Kabbalah, or the Tenukin. Um,
The Talmud being the foundation of their teachings, the uh,
but
Tanukim being their practices and chanting and outward manifestations of acting on these things, and the Kabbalah being a guidebook for communing with spirits and engaging in magical practices to summon angels and demons.
when you started talking about that, though, you said that the Talmud was originally not written down, correct?
Correct. It was the oral traditions.
You know what's wild about that? So the first thing that came to mind when you said that was Solzhenitsyn. He wrote the Gulag Archipelago and then had to memorize it word for word. And as you may know, if you've read that book, it's like, I think it was like 32 or 37 chapters. It's fucking like
Oh,
over
wow.
I can't remember if it's 1,000 or 2,000 pages long, but it's a really fucking long book. And he had, because he was in prison in the gulags, he had to memorize all of it that he had written, um, in order to transfer it once he got out. And he memorized this thing for years. And
It's quite
uh,
impressive.
I remember him, like, all I remember about him was that, like, a lot of people said that he was a like super anti-Semite or hated Jews. But then when I'm looking at him in his wiki page, he was uh, was born into a family that defied Soviet anti-religious campaign in the 1920s and remained devout members of the Russian Orthodox Church. However, he initially lost his faith in Christianity, became an atheist, and embraced Marxism Leninism while serving as a captain in the Red Army during World War II. And I'll have to look into it more so, but it's kind of interesting that that's that same mentality, and he has that Marxist thing, even though he's known as like hating Jews. Um,
which
he's
is
got that
unfortunate.
that got that Talmudic uh, idealism, and I think we were talking about the orthodoxy, or maybe I'm conflating things that I heard during the day today about the orthodoxy um, being connected to Judaism as well. Yeah, I'm not going to read too much into that, but it's just
But
interesting that that's that same mindset of the spoken word.
it, it is very interesting that the man went through the similar practice of memorizing what was his magnum opus, his great work, and took a similar approach that in order to conceal it, he didn't write it down in a manner that could be observed by others, and he memorized it. Very, very Jewish. Um, so to discuss some of the individuals that were involved in the meetings leading up to the assassination of the Romanovs, as we discussed, and I had briefly mentioned Trotsky, the American Jew backed by, if I'm not mistaken, the Warburgs and the Rothschilds. We got Sverdlov, Grigory Zinoviev, Lev Kamenev, Karl Radek, Maxim Litvinov, and Moisey Ritsky were all holding key positions of power. Then we have Lenin, who was a quarter Jew. They convened in a meeting in 1917 in St. Petersburg with these six Jews among the 12 leaders, and they decided on a violent power seizure. So the political bureau, which included four Jews, Trotsky, Sokolnikov, Zinoviev, and Kamenev, and the Military Revolutionary Committee, which had six Jews among its 18 members. The Revolutionary Military Center include Sverdlov and Ritsky. Um, so it also included, from what I have here, contemporary observers included Winston Churchill, 1920. I believe that, I guess, would be later members, U.S. Ambassador David R. Francis, the Netherlands Ambassador Udendijk. They were also noted the Jewish role in Bolshevism. Oh, I beg your pardon. They're just individuals who had recognized that Jews were involved in the Bolshevik Revolution. So the Soviet regime criminalized anti-Semitism, and I believe the penalty of which was death, if I'm not mistaken.
As it should be.
Which is their plan if they get their way in after they implement their Noahide laws.
Well,
So
that's Florida.
it starts in Florida. The idea being, which was covered by quite a number of people, is that Jews were behind the Bolshevik Revolution. There were a number of Jews involved. Name the Jews involved. I've named their organizations which were involved, And these Jews went on to kill millions and millions of, of Christian Orthodox, non-Jews and Jews alike. They don't necessarily discriminate. They'll kill Jews if it's a means to an end. Um, some people estimate 21.5 million were killed between 1929 and 1952. And, another 20 million arrested between 1935 and 1941, with 7 million of those shot. And others estimate that number is as high as 60 million. So these Jews, according to some people, continue to rule Russia to this day. Putin's a Jew. That the Cold War was Masonic theater, and the idea of Russia being boogeyman, and that enemy of the United States is uh, pure fallacy, and that they're actually both Jewish puppet entities which have been subverted by Jews, Freemasons, and Satanists, whether of the Jesuit order, the Orthodox Church, um, Judaism itself, or other secret societies. And what this leads into is where we find ourselves a little bit later on, or around the same time period. Um, the the idea of the Kalergi plan
Before you start
and
into that one,
the Warburgs. We don't have to get into all that. We've been going for some time now. But the idea was to transition discussion, Kalergi plan and the Warburgs, and if time permits, whether this time or the next, the formation of the Federal Reserve.
the fuck.
These are all they all coincide at the same time period. Um, Ed, the Bolshevik Revolution, and World War One are all kind of peas in a pod.
The fuck, what was I gonna say? Oh, you brought up the thing about the Cold War and all that theater and basically scaring the shit out of everybody, making us all believe that we're gonna die from nuclear weapons. It's very similar to what's been going on right now with Iran and Israel.
Yes.
And remember, I posted that meme that was going around of that girl that was like smoking the cigarette at the bus stop, like looking up at the camera, and like the quote was like, "I thought Israel and Iran were the same thing," like making fun of her because she looks ignorant, like that she would just say something ignorant like that. And then I was like, yeah, you people realize that like she's not wrong. Like this retard is like that bell curve meme where it's like the retard at one end and the fucking psychic mind fucker at the other end, like both realize this, and then the midwit in the middle is like thinks that they're
It's just
different.
yeah, they're just completely oblivious to the fact that it's two sides of the same coin. Yeah, no, it's interesting that often individuals with a certain degree of plain thinking, so to speak, have the ability to see through the bullshit. Or just people with autism that don't have a filter or um care to censor themselves. People like Bobby Fischer,
I just
who
call myself
was
honest. We don't have to sling words.
right, 100%. And like as someone who considers himself a pattern recognition specialist, and one who can see information when it's presented before me for what it truly is. you and I were discussing or going back and forth. Or no, it was in the low value mail chat. I posted something about the Belgian justice system, and their symbol and their icon
The shield.
is a shield with a red border, which is Red Shield, which is Rothschild. So there was a cover up of a satanic pedophile network which was kidnapping children. There was a guy who was keeping them in their base in his basement. He had cages. It's called the Dutroux affair, Dutroux, or OUX, I beg your pardon. And it involved the king of Belgium, King Leopold, his name was. I forget what number. Um, high-ranking politicians, people in finance, as well as as a network of procurers and the the local Freemasonic lodges. So these these networks exist in every major city, um, every every state capital or large city has these networks, and unfortunately, they're global at this point. As we've discussed, the international Jew, as Henry Ford described them, is a global problem.
It's just
He,
such a
he's a,
funny. It's just such a funny fucking thing to say.
but he described it well, and I believe it was a collection of volumes. He kind of took out his own newspaper, uh, the Dearborn, something along those lines, and the kind of the whole purpose of making it was to get this information out there so that people would be conscious. He at one time was sued by the Chrysler brothers because he wanted to use the profits that were made that year to raise wages for his employees. And the Chrysler brothers sued him on the grounds that it was a shareholder's duty to, no, a company's duty was to its shareholders, not its employees.
Was it Chrysler or Dodge?
Dodge Chrysler, I believe it was,
Okay.
maybe it wasn't Chrysler, maybe it was just Dodge, but it was, I think it was Dodge Chrysler.
It's
Yeah,
funny that uh, they would go on to purchase the
Mercedes Benz.
Mercedes Benz.
Yeah, Mercedes Benz is eventually owned by them, which is funny.
Yeah, they
So,
they 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 left that, but yeah.
Fiat owns it now, right?
Um, no, Mercedes Benz is their own thing.
They're back to their own thing again.
Yeah.
Um, did you want to take some time and discuss the Kalergi plan of the Warburgs, or did you want to kind of recap what we've gone over and um
We can keep going. I'm fine.
okay.
I'm not going to bed anytime soon.
So around the same time period as um the predecessors, the Russian Revolution and what would become World War II.
But oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, World War
What
One. I beg your pardon.
what do you have work tomorrow?
I do, but it's only 10:45 here, and I don't have work till 2:30 in the afternoon, so
Okay, okay.
I don't have any concerns.
All right.
So I just needed to blow my nose. I've had some boogers for a while, but we'll keep going. Um,
I can put a screen up for a second, just
d
pause
could
it.
you put a screen up and pause it for me and just start reading this Kalergi plan and the Warburgs for laying this foundation?
Let's see. All
The
right.
idea being that in 1916, Max Warburg, a prominent banker,
Yeah, I'll read
um,
that.
began began laying this groundwork.
screen's covered up, so
Copy that.
all right. So 1916, Max Warburg, a prominent banker and head of the German Secret Service during World War One, establishes a Bolshevik publishing house for Vladimir Lenin, as cited by Professor Anthony Sutton in Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. Referencing German Foreign Ministry archives and a study of Z.A.B. Zeman, 1917, Max Warburg persuades the German government under Kaiser Wilhelm II to allow Lenin and his entourage to travel through Germany to Russia, facilitating the Bolshevik Revolution. Similarly, Leon Trotsky is permitted to travel from the United States to Russia, despite being briefly interned in Nova Scotia, Canada, as a potential enemy agent. Paul Warburg, Max's brother, a partner of Kuhn, Loeb and Company in New York, having joined in 1902, and Jacob H. Schiff, head of the firm, provides significant financial support to Russian revolutionaries. 1919. H. Beamish founds the Britain's Society of the United Kingdom with the stated purpose of exposing influence of organized Jewry. You ready me to take the screen thing down? You can't hear you.
Oh.
Your mic is not in front of your face.
Oh, that'll do it, huh?
All right, there you go. You're back on screen. All right, so I ended on page 16, organized Jewry, like seventh sentence.
100%. I see where we are. So, the society publishes the newspaper Free Britain, uh, and nationalist literature, which continued into operations through the 70s. In 1920, for the sake of this, I just kind of put some key dates and summarized it rather than include the entire book, Warburg and the Kalergi Plan. I just wanted to hit some bullet points. So in the 1920s, in the United States, a communist push begins under Alexander uh, Bittelman, General Secretary of the organization publishing the Yiddish newspaper, Morning Fahrenheit. So again, Jews and communism. According to the Williams Intelligence Summary in February of 1955 in Santa Ana, California, the drive is linked to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which, as you know, is the NAACP, which was founded by Jewish revolutionaries, Dr. Henry Muskowitz and Anna Stransky, with Arthur B. Springham as president and Herbert H. Lehman as a director. 1922, Nicholas Coudenhove Kalergi founds the Pan-European Union, advocating for a united Europe. In the same year, the Kaiser, the former Chancellor of Germany, is in exile in the Netherlands. At the time, this may have still been Prussia. Can't say. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But no, in 1922, I think Germany's already been formed. So he's in exile in the Netherlands and expresses a regret in the Chicago Tribune in an interview following the advice of Jewish bankers. They wanted him to capitulate and say, "Oh, we shouldn't have done what we did in World War I," basically. So the individual who was primarily influencing the Kaiser to do so was Max Warburg. and
Hold on,
who
before you get too far on
please.
that at that same time, let's say around there, this is around World War I. And something that's funny, I always tell people that's funny about World War I is that I believe it was the Japanese went to Mexico to convince, like, to keep America busy fighting the Mexicans. The Japanese went over to Mexico and convinced them because they both had slitted eyes like that, that they were brothers from another mother, basically. It's kind of funny
Well,
about the.
I found an interesting thing on the on Twitter that shows that Japanese kanji is very similar to Hebrew in the manner in which it's written. And this again gets into the idea of the Tengu and the Kappa, these two Japanese beings in the folklore that are associated with images related to the images associated with Jews, as well as an idea that the Japanese Shinto temples are built in the same specifications as the manner in which the tabernacle was built, using um, X amount of feet to this amount of feet to that amount of feet. And I don't have that article available at the moment, but I'll try and have that when
You
we
know,
dive deeply into the Jewish influence on ancient Japan. So they could be one of the 10 lost tribes.
what's funny too is I think I've asked you. You never watched JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, right?
No, sir.
Okay, so it's this anime that's like, it's actually really really cool. It's just, if, like, it's there's like a severe amount of like autism, but like it's very clever, and like a lot of the people are named like after, like, there's like a lot of music references. So it's kind of cool, but like in the story it's like this reoccurring like bloodline of this guy, like like it's called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but like it's like the same soul reincarnated throughout time, fighting
Mm,
against a rival that is also evil, and like showing up in different countries throughout different times. um Basically a battle of like evil. And it's funny that like there's like this idea of the international Jew and this Japanese creator creating like a thing about like basically this guy that keeps reincarnating throughout life to fight this ultimate evil that keeps reincarnating itself by possessing somebody.
I
And
think
like,
they're alluding to something. No?
yeah, it's so funny to think, like, because that show has a lot of really complex references, but on the face value, it just looks like fucking like a severely autistic, like, stupid show. But
Right.
like when you think about like this traveling Jew throughout time, and like as we're discussing, like they show up like almost like the the fallen angels, or almost like the Nephilim,
Yeah.
like showing up in these different time periods, and like just like
Which is why
implanting
Dustin
himself.
Nimos associates them with demons and he speaks of them in that manner because they do happen to be quite mobile, and everywhere they go they engage in a parasitic nature. And I discussed this on JQ Radio 24/7, which is a Twitter space that I partake in. Um, in 1926, the Japanese expelled the Freemasons and the Jews shortly after. And the individual who dropped the bomb on both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, two predominantly Christian cities in Japan, was a Jew. And you could find that information in the Jewish press.
And you know what's crazy too is like in that JoJo show is that like it's an artifact that like emerges and then all of a sudden like possesses the person with like this ancient evil,
Mm.
and then like it involves always like a blood sacrifice every single time
Oh, always
of these people like for this evil to like uh
take form.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very much
He's basically a vampire, which obviously, there's so many similarities to
correct.
the vampires in this topic.
And as we spoke of in the previous episode, Jews and exsanguination and bloodletting and draining people of blood and using blood for rituals. It's again a very ancient practice, something that was taught to them by the fallen angels in a manner in which they were given reverence, as well as some people say it's a manner in which um, energies can be transferred. So you could take energy from the body, fear, anxiety, stress, and being blood is rich in iron, it almost holds its charge, and that can be consumed by the individual or used in ritual magic for these reasons, being it's energetically charged.
You know
Um,
what's funny is just thinking about like how I said before that like money could be like a substitute for these blood rituals, and like that money itself is money laundering for blood blood sacrifices, which is kind of the ultimate Jewish trick
yeah,
is having money laundering of blood rituals.
it's like a circle jerk where it's like human centipede where it just becomes a Jew ass to mouth fucking situation where it's yeah it's very much cyclical, almost like the Ouroboros and the snake eating its tail. Um, the deeper you go, it's cyclical and represents is represented by the Ouroboros.
I never really thought about how anti-Semitic JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is.
Sounds like I need to watch it.
It's
No, I'm
actually
just
pretty good.
sounds good. I like the idea of it. Um, so back to Kalergi and his backing by the Warburgs. He was, I believe, introduced to the Warburgs or the Rothschilds. Let me find this note. Okay. So he founds the Pan-European Union, which becomes the predecessor to the EU, advocating for a united Europe. The Kaiser expresses regret and capitulates to the Jewish bankers, Max Warburg, and he allows Lenin's passage through Germany, which goes on to be one of the catalysts to the Bolshevik Revolution. Uh, in 1923, Kalergi publishes Pan-European idea through Pan-Europäer Verlag in Vienna, promoting his vision of a united Europe. In 1924, Baron Louis Rothschild introduces Kalergi to Max Warburg, who donates 60,000 gold marks to fund the Pan-European Union in its first 3 years. Kalergi also writes a pamphlet, Pacifism, discussing pacifism, later known as Praktischer Idealsimis or Pan-European Verlag. So in this document, he describes the future of Europe as a mix of Eurasian Negroids.
Yay.
Res- yeah. Fun, huh? Resembling ancient Egyptians in their appearance, according to him, but it sounds more like modern Egyptians and less like ancient Egyptians, because for those who know, ancient Egyptians may have been Caucasian, and the majority of people in the northern portion of Africa uh, were not dark skinned, and some of those who may have been depicted in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs with their bronze colored skin was the result of harvesting copper for the purpose of essentially creating a sunscreen, because to protect themselves they mine this copper in the Americas. But that's a digression. So these Eurasian Negroid mongrels would be the new race, which would replace the white Christian Europeans, and Jews would be the new aristocracy, which would lead um, the future of Europe. So Kalergi visits London, where Leopold Amory introduces him to Winston Churchill. In the United States, Felix Warburg, another Warburg, and a philanthropist, and Paul Warburg, one of the founders of the Federal Reserve System in 1913, arrange a 3-month tour for Kalergi. So he goes on a tour of the United States. 1925, the Austrian Masonic magazine, The Beacon, so again, a Masonic magazine, The Beacon, praises Kalergi, who was a high degree Freemason, for his pan-European efforts, describing them as a Masonic work of the highest order, quote unquote, and expressing satisfaction in his membership in Austrian Freemasonry. In 1935, Kalergi edits and updates Anti-Semitism Through the Ages, which was forth by his father, Count Heinrich Coudenhove Kalergi. So he gives his take on his father's work, which is published by Hutchinson and Co. And in 1936, Winston Churchill becomes the president of the British section of the new Commonwealth Society, which demands an international tribunal with police and air forces, which sounds like a predecessor to the UN and NATO. In 1938, between 1938 and 1943, a German SS booklet published in six editions accuses Kalergi of promoting a racial mongrel Europe while advocating for Jewish racial purity to form a new aristocracy. So this is where we find ourselves today, where if you type in mother and father or something of that nature, you'll see a black guy with a white woman and a white man with a black woman. And that's what they're promoting. And they might have like an black Asian looking kid, very Kalergi-esque. So in 1946, on September 18th, Churchill, in a Zurich speech, Zurich, Switzerland, acknowledges, I beg your pardon, Kalergi as the creator of the United European Movement, which Churchill would become the first president of in October. Max Warburg dies this year, having remained a supporter of Kalergi's movement up until his death. In 1949, Kalergi publishes Europe Seeks Unity through the Institute of Public Affairs and Regional Studies at New York University, advocating for European federation and common currency. Uh, they say possibly gold base, but as we know, that wouldn't be the case. Um, In 1950, James P. Warburg, son of Paul Warburg, testifies before the U.S. Senate on Foreign Relations Committee, stating that the world government will be achieved by consent or conquest. Huh. It's quite a bold statement. 1953, Kalergi's book, An Idea Conquers the World, with a preface by Winston Churchill, is published by Hutchinson and Co. It details the origins of the Pan-European Union and its evolution of the Council of Europe.
How with all of this, like, I mean, this is all like factual documented stuff. Why
Correct.
is it like all I ever hear is like the Kalergi plan um is just a conspiracy theory. Like it's in his own fucking words. It's in all of these people's fucking own words. Like
Well, it's often the case because should you search this information, you will have a certain degree of difficulty um, pinning down this data should you use conventional sources like Google, which is ran and orchestrated by former members of the 8200 um, Israeli computer intelligence agency, which sole job is to steer and control the internet. That's literally what they fucking do.
but why doesn't anybody like because I didn't even know anything about like all I've heard about is the clergy plan and it seems blatantly obvious, but like why doesn't anyone ever just mention, hey, his book, An Idea
Well,
Conquers the World? I mean, that would especially with
yeah,
Winston Churchill being the preface, and then
yeah.
obviously Churchill's fucking destruction, or like the whole, like his whole, basically being the cause of World War II. Like he,
100%. He was the main catalyst for getting uh Europe involved against the Germans. But then again, was Hitler a Rothschild? Was his mother the maid? Um, uh, a whore who slept with the lord of the manor, who gave birth to a child who would go on to usher in the creation of Israel through the invasion of Europe. I mean, it's complicated. Some say Hitler was a great guy, and a lot of this information is hogwash in order to discount the great man that he was and what he tried doing for the people of Germany and all white people across Europe. Again, that's something I'd have to really dig into further. There is someone on Twitter who I had some correspondence with who shared with me that a lot of this is slander, but then was it Himmler who was the individual who had his affinity for the esoteric and the occult, but from what we understand, Germany outlawed Freemasonry and expelled Freemasons from the country. So it's hard to say because the water's a little muddy, but some of his actions are amazing for the people of Germany, and some of them, like the Havar Agreement, suggests that he may have been secretly working for the Jews.
it's so crazy that you have to know all of this stuff because as I'm talking to you and listening to you, it's like I'm just thinking about the arguments that I get in with my boomer dad about this shit and just trying to convince people like that. And it's almost a moot point of trying to convince him, but like I don't even need to know that like all of what you just detailed in that like I don't know that paragraph or two, and like that the clergy plan is like it's just I can just see it. It doesn't take a genius to go and see. Oh, they're importing all of these fucking brown people to sow
Right.
dissent, and like they say it like what's his name, George Soros or the other guy Klaus Schwab. Like they all say this shit openly.
Openly, yeah.
And it's like, but I didn't know that he had like all these books that are like, it's right there. It's in their fucking like, it's just like when you're in school and they always tell you like how bad Hitler was. And I never got to hear any of his speeches
Any of his speeches,
until
right?
like 2 years ago. Or I remember even just like being in college in my early 20s and being like, oh, that's weird. The stuff that Hitler's saying is kind of right. And like to
Yeah.
even tell people that is like, it just ostracized me like instantly from most people.
It
And
wasn't
like,
until recently for me that I started hearing some of Hitler's speeches. When I found JQ Radio, they play his speeches every night translated in English. And I get off work at midnight, so I've been able to take these in recently and start to hear some of the things that's being said. That's why I'm still conflicted about him. And I hold my tongue when jumping to conclusions when discussing him, although some of his actions again allowed for the creation of Israel. Some of the things he was talking about and doing were good for the German people, but in the end, the German people kind of lost as a result of what transpired. So it's hard to say.
he
Again,
kind of
it's
reminds me as you're saying this,
of Trump.
like not just Trump, but like Jordan Peterson,
Hmm.
because Jordan Peterson had such a great message, and then you see his downfall. And it's like all these people like start out really great, and then something happens to them where like
Oh
they
yeah.
just turn into the complete opposite person. It's not even that they were that person from the beginning. It was just like something switches. And obviously, with Peterson's switch, it definitely is rooted in his Daily Wire uh, activities.
Yeah, the Jew connection.
Or, you have like Kanye West, who had his handler. You had Michael Jackson, who had his handler.
Yep.
And I was listening to Zoomer Historian recently and he was talking about how it's, even though like a lot of his stuff on there kind of like is supportive of like the Germans, and he's definitely not a pro like race mixing EU kind of guy, but like he's also like talking down about anybody that thinks that Hitler escaped to Argentina and
Hmm.
all of that stuff. And it's like I I feel like Hitler had like that handler, just like Kanye did with that that um that doctor. They both had these doctors or whatever
Hmm.
handling them, and Hitler was doing fine until this guy got involved, is kind of what it seems like.
Then he develops the alleged drug problem associated with methamphetamine and other drug use, which is often associated with Hitler. And you've seen that footage of him at the Berlin Olympic Games where he's kind of off his off his rocker on a little bit of a bender. But yeah, that could have been the result of him being slowly um fed a little something first for the purpose of keeping his mind sharp during the war in order to work at all hours of the night and in order to stay sharp and focus, which eventually led to a degree of psychosis. Or in paranoia. It's really hard to say, but then you could kind of see the same thing as you mentioned. You mentioned Michael Jackson. He had that doctor around him, and maybe Michael Jackson had a drug problem or whatever the case may be, but next thing you know, he's dying of a fentanyl overdose.
You
And
know who Michael Jackson also was associated with in that same
Shmooly,
yeah.
Shmooly, yeah.
And you know what happened with Trump? Trump has his own personal doctor as well.
Well, I've seen this Jewish guy who's constantly around him, but I didn't know had his Trump had his own personal doctor.
He's had this guy, and there was, I remember during Trump's first administration where they were constantly pushing this narrative of this picture of the drawer of
With the Sudafed,
the Sudafed.
yeah, he was hopped up on Sudafed essentially. Like, but why not take Adderall? It's again, it's one of those things where um Trump's kind of like when you were talking about who you thought I may think Hitler reminded you of. You brought up Jordan Peterson, but I also see like kind of Trump as a similar figure in the sense that a lot of the stuff he said initially was great. He's going to make America great again. He's going to do this and that for the Americans. He's going to expel the illegals. He's going to give people uh, he's going to abolish the Federal Reserve. He's going to get rid of the income tax. He's going to do all these amazing things, and then he just goes on sucking Israeli dick the whole time. So it's quite interesting where we find ourselves. Are we in the process of our president helping establish Greater Israel in the same way that Adolf Hitler did, through the Reich? It appears that way, but again, for I'd have to study Hitler a bit more. But from what I've seen from Trump, it could be his Freemasonic allegiances through his Scottish and German background, or it just could be the fact that he's a Jew. I believe the assassination was fake, as I discussed. It was a ritual, which was an Old Testament practice of anointing kings, generals, and I'm not mistaken, priests. Aaron and his sons were anointed in the same fashion, where the blood of a ram was sacrificed, and its blood was wiped on the earlobe, the thumb, and the big toe, and I believe it's right earlobe, which is the exact manner in which Trump was anointed. If you go through the photos taken by that famous photographer who happened to take the photos of, I think, 9/11 and some other interesting things, happened to take the photos that day front and center. So yeah, I'm kind of the belief that Trump is a Trojan horse and he's helping create Greater Israel. But
Slav says that he's doubting your calling it fake thing. I'm I'm
well,
more
no,
on the
people,
side that it's
someone
real, but
died. Someone got
yeah,
shot and died. I'm not saying that like that fireman didn't get shot and murdered. They don't mind sacrificing people, but did did someone take a shot at him and God willing, he turned his head and happened to dodge a bullet by a tenth of a second, and he has no mark whatsoever on that particular ear associated with a gunshot wound. If I've again, you could find this information on X. There's pictures side by sides of his ear before and his ear now. He has no wound, and as I stated, it's associated with the practice of anointing kings and generals in Exodus 29:20. So that said, go ahead. It looks like you had a question.
Oh no, Slav was saying 130 yards is impossible to group at an earlobe with a red dot set far up on the rail. Well, he was
I,
using
I I'm
iron sights,
suggesting
but
that the bullet was nowhere near him. I'm suggesting that the bullet didn't get close to him, and that the blood either came out of the pockets of the Secret Service and was actually from a ram, or maybe they nicked his ear with a razor. But either way, there is no evidence of his ear being shot. None whatsoever.
130 yards is not that bad. Like he used an iron sight, but with a red dot, I used to be able to do. really consistent shots from, what was it, 150 to 200 yards just off
And
my
wasn't that
shoulder.
cocksucker in like a BlackRock commercial?
Yeah, but it would be very easy to make a shot from that if you do have a red dot, if you're in prone position. Because, like I said, when I used to practice quite a bit, I could, from a shoulder shot standing, um, be able to make pretty consistent, like small groups. Aiming for an earlobe, yeah, that's a little difficult. Um, I mean, I could probably, but
Fake and gay.
he was
Fake and gay.
also um, supposedly not a great shot and got kicked off his rifle team for being such a shitty shot. There was a video, I think I either privatized it or removed it off my page, of, it was just a short clip of when they're all ducking except for one lady, some blonde lady. If you're looking at him at the podium and it's on the right, if you're looking at it, and she barely even flinches, which is so weird to me. Like, no one really talked about it, but there's like a lady that's kind of like, let's see, if the podium is right here, god damn, it's hard to do backwards, but like she's in the lower right corner of it,
Mm.
and barely, she's like wearing sunglasses, and she just barely reacts to it, and then doesn't duck down or anything like that until, like, I don't know, barely anything, like barely any reaction to that. Okay, so Slav remembers it. Yeah, I had that video up. I maybe I'll unprivate or make sure it's still up there, but it's easy to go and see when he shoots or gets shot at. It's such a weird thing. I can't believe no one talks about that, but that's kind of an aside. Um,
No, and nothing wrong with going down that rabbit hole. I did discuss it. So, for those interested, look at Exodus 29:20. Um, look at current and before and after photos of his ear, and you'll see that it was an Old Testament ritual for anointing kings and generals.
I mean,
Um,
I can also see that, like, with the level of plastic surgeons that he has access to, and whatever, like, stem cell regenerative bullshit, you could easily, I don't know, I would assume, make it look
ah,
very
at
good.
70 years old, I don't know. I don't think your body heals like that, even with stem cell action. I mean, maybe it's at 70. I mean, if they drink enough child's blood, they live to 100 these days. So, um, again, pardon if that affects the algorithm, saying fun stuff like that. But we were discussing the Kalergi plan and
I believe you were
19
up to 1955.
yeah 1955. We had just discussed the United Nations being formed shortly after the Council of Europe. Um, again, predecessors to world government alongside the Atlantic Treaty. In 1955, the Williams Intelligence Summary claims the NAACP was supported by figures like Eleanor Roosevelt, uh, is driven by Jewish Marxist revolutionaries to disrupt racial harmony in the U.S. post World War II. So the Kalergi plan gets into full swing um, post World War II, and by 1955, a report's been written discussing it. Um, the text also describes an influx of West Indian and West African migrants into the United Kingdom, attributed to economic policies like sugar production restrictions and unsecured loans from New York. This is reported by the Empire News and other newspapers. In South Africa, agitation against apartheid groups like Christian Action, distinct from Catholic Action, is criticized as politically motivated and lacking moral grounding, with some African clergy and communities reportedly supporting the apartheid. Um, the The Bilderberg Group is noted as a high-level think tank, which was kind of one of the predecessors to the World Economic Forum, and it involved financiers like the Rothschilds and the Wallenbergs, and it was promoting a united Europe, uh, one of the precursors to a one world government. And
Wasn't
we,
Eleanor Roosevelt a lesbian?
uh, I wouldn't be surprised. Like Chuck Schumer's wife is just a
God, that's a
dude.
rough one.
Oh, dude, I think that's a dude. And like the idea of Obama's wife and even George Bush's wife, uh,
No
Papa
one's
Bush,
as
not
bad as Schumer's wife, though.
no, but Schumer's is she looks like a linebacker that's like 5'6". She's just stocky. She's got some shoulders on her, a bit of an Adam's apple,
That
and
face,
looks like a dude.
that face is so bad.
It looks like a Jewish dude in a dress. And she gets
You know he's a sociopath because he can be pictured with his arm around her, feigning a smile.
that's that's well said. How long are we running right now?
um, we've probably been, let's see, we started at 11. We've probably been going an hour or 3 hour, 3.5 hours probably. So if you want to
What-
stop here at the formation of the Federal Reserve, because that's a big topic.
Yeah, let's save that for next week, and I'll dig up some more information. I had included it if needed, but the amount of depth we went into and non sequiturs, I don't think it's a good idea to just gloss over this just for the sake of including it in this particular video. A 3.5 hours is a great conversation in my opinion.
Yeah.
And we went over some good things and addressed some important issues.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream, guys. Um, Appreciate you guys watching. If you feel like you enjoyed it, like it. If not, actually, I won't say that. Um, but appreciate you guys being here. And all right, so I'm going to end the stream. And thank you for being here.